Welcome to episode 135 of the Loane Hockey Podcast. For today, we're going to be talking about some standouts in last night's matchup between Anaheim and Chicago. And Anaheim ended up making the comeback. They came away with 3-2 win. The Hawks were up for a majority of the game, and then they let it slip in the third. I feel like there's a lot of these games this season where even though Chicago hasn't won a lot, they've had plenty of chances to win, and they seem to let go and let off the gas a little bit in the third period. And again, I know that Chicago is not the best team and they're one of the worst in the league right now, but at the same time, they still should be trying to find ways to win games, especially when they're holding on to leads for majority of the game, and then being able to let it go that late in the game is not an ideal scenario for them. But so we'll start with some standouts in terms of Anaheim first. I thought Alex Killorn looked really good in this game, a goal and an assist for 2 points, and a guy who really fits this team, this style really well. He plays a power game, but he also plays a skill game, and he brings a good scoring touch, especially around the net. He's really good at finishing on first touch, and he's got an ability to be able to finish around the net and be able to use his instincts around that. So this allows him to be able to be a threat in scoring situations all the time. And he's a guy that can move up and down their top nine and be able to be a fit anywhere on the wings there as well. Trevor Zegras looked really good in this game. He's been off to a slow start this season, but he had a really good game yesterday. He had two assists, and he looked really good in possession scenarios. He looked really good using his hip puck in the ozone in terms of his puck skills. He looked really good controlling the walls, controlling the corner battles, and being able to use his escapability with his feet and his hands to be able to simultaneously maneuver around defenders. And he looked like a guy that showcased his skill that would allow him to be able to be an almost 70-point player a couple years prior. And for him, just finding a role within Greg Cronin's team, I feel like is something that is a little bit troublesome for him right now, but at the same time, he's still able to be effective. He's still able to be a possession driver. He's still really skilled, and he's still really fun to watch when he's playing at his best. And he had a really good game yesterday, so that was really good to see out of him. Leo Carlson looked really good in this game as well, playing against Connor Bedard once again, and from the same draft class, and he had a goal and looked good with his ability to control his size, his reach, his ability to extend possessions with his size. And he's really good and he's really improved upon that ability ever since being drafted from the SHL and translating that to the NHL. I'm not surprised that he's translated to the NHL this far. He looks like a guy in the future that could be a very productive center for them and be a staple in their top six as a centerman. And a guy who looks really good and really mature for his age, especially with his two-way game, but also his rush play and his ozone patterning and his ability to use puck protection. He looks very mature in many different areas of his game, and it's going to be exciting to see how he continues to progress and develop over the course of time. Pavel Mintyukov looked really good in this game. I was really impressed with him. I wrote an article about him today about his weak side deactivation on his goal that he had yesterday. And just the sequence was really nice. I thought he showed a really good ability to retreat, but also be able to activate downhill when necessary. So he showed the ability to retreat and go back to the blue line when he had to, but he wasn't afraid to activate as a weak side D and be able to be a threat in space. And sometimes I believe that the weak side D is sometimes the most important player to a team's ozone patterning and movement, but sometimes they often get underestimated because they fade away from the play. You don't really notice them. But in terms of Yugov's goal yesterday, it was really impressive, and he had a really impressive shot and velocity on his shot as well. Sam Colangelo is another player who looked really good in this game. Actually, he was a Blackhawks draft target a couple of years prior, speaking of which, but at the same time, Colangelo, he looked really good at being able to use his size, using his scoring touch up the middle of the ice and working down the middle and being able to play interior a lot of the time. I feel like that's a strength of his that's really improved, and being able to use his size and his ability to maintain a center of gravity has continuously allowed him to be able to stay controlled when he has the puck and also without the puck. So when he's in battles or trying to win 50-50s, then it allows him to be able to stay on his feet a little easier than others. He did a really good job of being able to utilize that. And I thought Brian Dumoulin had a good game as well in this game. I was impressed with his shutdown ability, his ability to close line rush, his ability to break out pucks either through stretch pass or individually as a carrier, and just showcase not necessarily a ton of offensive flair or skill in transition, but the ability to be a shutdown player, shut down the Hawks' top players when necessary, be able to be a PK guy and be able to kill penalties there. Just an all around defensive, reliable player and a guy who's very noticeable in that sense as well. And then Chicago side, Jason Dickinson, I thought had the best game, arguably, alongside Connor Bedard. And Jason Dickinson had two goals. They're off really nice passes from Connor Bedard. So he was rolling all game long, though. I thought Dickinson played a really good game, especially on the wings. He looked like a guy who was really complimenting Bedard really well at even strength situations yesterday. I felt like Dickinson was able to read off him really well. He was able to understand where to be, where not to be, how to position himself in scoring areas and in interior space to be able to be a shot threat. And that allowed him to score twice in this game. And then getting to kind of Bedard, he used deception on both his passes. He had two assists yesterday, but he used deception on both of them, so allowed him to be able to fool the defense of Anaheim in different scenarios. So Bedard was really good yesterday. He was moving his feet. He was quick to move off the hop. He's quick with his acceleration. I thought he was moving well, but also making plays with a lot of pace and a lot of energy. So that definitely helped him in this game. And he was very productive and looked like an elite play driver in this game as well. And looked fantastic overall. And they shifted him to wing to start this game, which I thought was interesting to see how that would fare for him, but seemed to do really well for him. He seemed to adapt really well to that as well. And then Teuvo Teravainen, I thought he looked really good, not necessarily as a checker in this game or defensively. I noticed him a lot offensively in neutral zone play. And I noticed some of his forechecking details and how he's angling guys off, how he's cutting the ice in half. I noticed in terms of his rush play, how he's able to control the dot lane. I noticed how he's able to maneuver with his feet on entry play using the ability to maintain crossover usage and also edge work. And so simultaneously speaking, that allowed him to be able to sometimes be an entry threat with speed and be able to be a rush threat on different scenarios. So Teravainen I thought was really good in this game. He stood out and he was very effective all across the board and just played a really sound game overall. TJ Brody, even though there was one sequence where he had a bad turnover, and outside of that, I thought TJ Brody had a good game, good shutdown game. He was good shutting down entries, denying entries, and being able to hold the line. And a guy who plays a sound shutdown game and can play with his stick and can play with his feet to be able to close gaps and shut ice down. So with Brody, he was noticeable there. I noticed his ability sometimes on the offensive side of the puck and sometimes in transition, which I feel like some of that and some of those habits he's inherited from Sheldon Keefe's system last year in Toronto. And they still are a little evident right now in terms of his transition play and his willingness to activate. And so Brody looked really good in this game as well. And then Taylor Hall, I felt like ever since he was scratched and coming back into the lineup yesterday, he played a really good game. And even though he didn't have any points, he looked good. He was moving well. He was moving off the wall. He was getting into space. And he hasn't been the most productive player of the Hawks team this season thus far. But at the same time, Hall's been a guy who can showcase some of that offensive skill. And it's going to be interesting to see what they do with him. I would imagine come trade deadline day, he would be moved and they'll find a different team for him. I would actually be really intrigued to see if they trade him back to Edmonton and to see if that how that situation could play out. I feel like Edmonton could actually be a really good fit for Hall this year, especially since Hall's in the final year of his deal. You can retain some salary on him. And yeah, Edmonton could be a good fit. It just depends on if they're going to make a run to the playoffs or not. So it'll be interesting to see how the situation fares out with Taylor Hall come the rest of the season.